Welcome, dear listener, to another chilling tale brought to you by Gordon Dark Tales. Tonight, we delve into the heart of a dense, unyielding forest where the line between predator and prey begins to blur. Our story follows Ethan Grayson, a seasoned hunter seeking solitude in the wilderness alongside his loyal companion Max. But what begins as a tranquil weekend in nature soon spirals into a harrowing nightmare. Shadows seem to watch, and an unseen menace turns the hunter into the hunted. Are you brave enough to uncover the truth lurking in the dark? What happened to Ethan and Max deep within the forest? Let your imagination guide you, but beware, the woods hold secrets that may never let you rest. Grab your headphones, dim the lights, and prepare for a suspenseful journey into the unknown.
Life in a small town has its rhythm, its own kind of stillness. For most people, it's the kind of life that feels simple, maybe even boring. For me, it was exactly what I needed. After serving in the military and seeing things no one should ever see, I craved the quiet. I thought I'd find peace here. But what I'm about to share with you, what happened in that forest, left scars deeper than anything I brought back from Afghanistan. I was a soldier, a proud one, until the day everything changed. A roadside bomb in the middle of nowhere shattered more than just my convoy. It took my right leg, my sense of purpose, and for a long time, my will to keep going. They sent me home with a prosthetic and a medical discharge. But they didn't give me a guidebook on how to live the rest of my life. That's when Max came into the picture. Max wasn't just a dog, he was my second chance. A buddy of mine from the service had this idea. Get a dog, he said. It'll help. I thought it was stupid at first, but then Max showed up. This wiry pup with boundless energy and eyes that seemed to look straight into my soul. From the moment I brought him home, he became my reason to get up in the morning. Max was more than a pet. He was my family, my shadow, my rock. When I struggled to adjust to my new life, when the phantom pains in my missing leg became too much to bear, Max was there. He'd nudge me with his nose, bring me his favorite toy, or just sit beside me like he knew all the words I couldn't say. He wasn't trained for therapy, but somehow he knew exactly what to do. Hunting became our thing. It wasn't just about the thrill of the chase. It was about finding a piece of myself again. Out in the woods, it didn't matter that I had a prosthetic leg or a chest full of memories I didn't want. It was just me and Max, moving as one. He loved every second of it. The crunch of leaves under his paws, the scents on the wind, the way the world seemed to open up for him. Max wasn't just my hunting partner. He was my best friend. He never judged, never doubted, never left my side. In the military, they drilled into us to never leave a man behind. It was something I carried with me every day. But Max was the one I let down, and that's something I'll never forgive myself for. The trip to the forest was supposed to be a getaway, a chance to clear my head, the kind of place where cell phones don't work and the only sounds are the wind through the trees and the calls of the birds. Just me and Max, like always. I remember loading up the truck that morning, Max bouncing around like a puppy, his excitement contagious. It felt good, normal, like the world wasn't such a heavy place. But looking back now, I can see the cracks in that perfect picture. I can hear the silence that was too quiet, feel the unease that I tried to ignore. The bond I had with Max, the trust, the understanding it wasn't enough to stop what was coming. What happened in that forest didn't just take Max from me. It took a piece of my soul. The memories of Afghanistan, the nightmares that used to haunt me, they pale in comparison to what I saw, what I felt that weekend. I'm telling this story not because I want sympathy, but because I need to get it out. Maybe by saying it, by letting someone else carry it for a little while, I can finally find some peace. There's something liberating about leaving the noise of the city behind, the hum of engines, the chatter of crowds. It all fades into nothingness as the road stretches farther into the countryside. For me, that drive felt like shedding layers of stress with every passing mile. Max was at his usual spot, the passenger seat, his nose pressed against the half-open window. Every now and then his ears perked up at the sight of cows grazing or the distant call of a hawk. His excitement was contagious. The closer we got to the forest, the narrower the roads became. The tall buildings were long gone, replaced by rolling fields that soon gave way to towering trees. The asphalt gave way to gravel, and the air grew cooler, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and damp earth. Max let out a low whine, not of discomfort but anticipation. He knew where we were headed. This wasn't our first trip to the woods, but something about this time felt different. The forest we were headed to wasn't the kind that families visit for a picnic or weekend camping. It was wild, untamed, and secluded. That was the draw for me. It wasn't just about hunting. It was about stepping into a world untouched by the chaos of modern life. For a while, I wanted to forget the war, the city, and even myself. Just me, Max, and the silence of the wilderness. By the time we reached the edge of the forest, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dirt trail. I parked the car near a clearing, the tires crunching softly over fallen leaves. Max jumped out before I could even grab my gear, his tail wagging furiously as he sniffed around. His enthusiasm was reassuring, though I couldn't ignore the subtle unease creeping in. The forest stood like a wall in front of us, its dense canopy swallowing most of the sunlight. It was eerily quiet, no birds, no rustling of small animals, just the sound of Max's paws on the ground and my boots following behind. I chalked it up to the time of day. Animals tend to settle as the evening approaches, right? We trekked further in, deeper than I'd gone before. Every step felt like peeling back a layer of civilization. Diving headfirst into the heart of the wild, the trees grew taller, their branches intertwining above like a natural cathedral. Moss clung to the bark, and the occasional fallen log served as a reminder of the forest's age and untamed beauty. Max was always ahead, stopping every so often to glance back as if to say, "Keep up." I couldn't help but smile. This was exactly what I'd needed. A chance to breathe, to exist without any expectations or responsibilities. But as we set up camp in a small clearing, that nagging feeling returned. The quiet wasn't just peaceful, it was oppressive. I caught myself glancing over my shoulder more than once, scanning the shadows for something. The sun dipped lower, casting the forest in hues of gold and orange. I prepared the small tent while Max lounged nearby, occasionally perking up his ears at some distant sound I couldn't hear. We had everything we needed for the night. A fire pit ready to be lit, supplies neatly packed, and my rifle within arm's reach. Still, I couldn't shake the tension building in my chest. As the first stars began to peek through the canopy, I told myself it was just the forest playing tricks on me. After all, it wasn't the first time I'd been out here alone. But it was the first time the woods didn't feel like a sanctuary. Something was different this time, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Max, however, seemed unbothered, his tail thumping gently against the ground. For now, that was enough to keep me calm. Tomorrow would be better, I thought. Tomorrow, the forest would feel like home again. The morning broke earlier than I expected, the faint glow of sunlight filtering through the trees. The forest felt quieter than it should have been. I stretched and reached out to where Max usually curled up beside me, but his spot was empty. At first, I wasn't alarmed. Max had a habit of waking up before me to explore nearby. Still, it wasn't like him to wander far. "Max!" I called out, my voice cutting through the stillness. I waited, expecting the familiar sound of his paws crunching leaves or his joyful bark in response. Nothing. The unease started to creep in, but I shook it off. He couldn't have gone far. Grabbing my boots and rifle, I stepped out into the clearing. His tracks were easy to spot in the damp earth, leading away from the camp and into the dense undergrowth. They were fresh, probably no more than an hour old. That reassured me. For a moment. As I followed the trail, the forest seemed different than the day before. The towering trees, once majestic and welcoming, now loomed overhead like silent sentinels. The light barely reached the ground, casting everything in a dim, shadowy haze. Each step I took seemed to echo louder than it should have. The tracks led deeper into the woods, weaving through patches of thick foliage and over uneven ground. I kept calling his name, hoping for a sign of life. "Max, come on, boy!" Still no response. My frustration grew with every step, but so did the nagging sense that something wasn't right. Then the tracks stopped, abruptly. One moment they were there, clear and distinct in the dirt, and the next, gone. No scuffle marks, no indication that he had doubled back or veered off the path. Just nothing. I knelt down, examining the area more closely. It didn't make sense. A dog doesn't just vanish. I looked around, scanning the forest for anything out of place. That's when I noticed it. A faint impression in the mud, smaller than my boot, but unmistakably human. The print was fresh, partially smudged, as if whoever left it had been in a hurry. A chill ran down my spine, and for a moment, I felt completely exposed. The trees around me seemed denser, the shadows darker. Was someone else out here? My grip on the rifle tightened as I stood, my eyes darting from one shadow to the next. I had hunted enough to know when I was being watched. I decided to press on, convinced that Max was still out there. But as I moved deeper into the forest, I started noticing other things. Subtle signs that I wasn't alone. A branch snapped somewhere in the distance, followed by what sounded like a faint rustle of leaves. I stopped and listened, my senses on high alert. The deeper I went, the more oppressive the forest felt. The air carried a weight, not physical but psychological, like the trees themselves were conspiring to hide something. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, but I couldn't. Not without Max. Then I saw it, another track, this one clearer than the first. It wasn't from Max. The print was deeper, as if whoever left it was carrying something heavy. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. I crouched low, scanning the area for more clues, but the forest had gone eerily still again. It wasn't just the absence of sound that unsettled me, it was the feeling, the unmistakable sense of being hunted. The tables had turned, and I was no longer the predator in these woods. Hours of searching had drained the adrenaline from my body, leaving only a gnawing pit of worry in my gut. I had called out for Max until my voice felt raw, pushing deeper into the forest, following trails that seemed promising only to fade into nothing. The dense canopy above dimmed the daylight, making the woods feel even more oppressive as the hours dragged on. Finally, I stumbled upon a break in the trees. A small clearing, silent and eerily untouched. That's when I saw him. Max. My heart dropped. He lay motionless, his golden fur streaked with dirt and something darker. I ran to him, dropping to my knees, my rifle clattering to the ground beside me. My hands trembled as I reached out, hoping, praying for a sign of life. But the cold stiffness of his body told me everything I didn't want to know. My best friend was gone. The sight of him shattered me, but it was the wounds that made my blood run cold. They weren't the ragged, chaotic marks of a wild animal attack. No, these were deliberate, clean, precise cuts. The kind made by someone who knew what they were doing. Someone with intent. My mind raced. This wasn't an accident, wasn't nature taking its course. Someone had done this. And if they'd done this to Max, they were capable of much worse. As I tried to steady my breathing, my eyes caught something glinting in the dirt nearby. I leaned closer and saw it. A torn piece of fabric, dark and frayed, with a texture that didn't match anything Max would have had on him. It looked out of place, almost like it had been left behind on purpose. Next to it, partially hidden beneath a layer of fallen leaves, was a small metal object. A tool, maybe? Or something far more sinister? I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever was responsible for this wasn't far away. The clearing felt too exposed, too vulnerable. A wave of anger surged through me, hot and uncontrollable. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. Max had been more than a dog. He was my partner, my protector, my family. And someone had taken him from me. But beneath the anger was something else. Fear. not just for myself, but for what kind of person or thing could do something so calculated, so cruel. The forest, which had always been a place of refuge, now felt like a trap. Every rustle of leaves, every crack of a branch sent my senses into overdrive. I had to leave, I told myself. Get out of this cursed place and call for help. But deep down, I knew leaving wasn't enough. Whoever or whatever did this was still out there, and they weren't finished yet. The forest was no longer a peaceful retreat. It had turned into a living maze, each shadow and rustle conspiring to set my nerves on edge. The moment I realized I wasn't alone, a chill ran down my spine, deeper than any winter night I'd endured. At first, I thought I was imagining it, just paranoia from Max's disappearance. But the sound of deliberate, measured steps confirmed my worst fear. Someone or something was out there. I froze in place, letting my breathing steady as I strained to listen. The footsteps weren't consistent. As if whoever it was knew the terrain well, using the cover of the trees to their advantage. My instincts from my military days kicked in, and I crouched low, scanning the surroundings for any sign of movement. It didn't take long to spot it. A flicker of shadow darting between the trees, too deliberate to be an animal. The ground beneath my boots felt uneven as I moved cautiously toward higher ground. My hunting rifle, usually a tool of precision and control, now felt like a fragile lifeline against whatever was out there. I clutched it tighter, my knuckles white, and reminded myself to keep calm. The forest was no place for panic. It could cloud judgment, and that was something I couldn't afford. As I ascended a small hill covered in dense undergrowth, the footsteps quickened. I stopped, pressing myself against the bark of an old oak tree. My eyes darted to every dark corner, every shifting shadow. Then I saw it. Movement again, but closer this time. Too close. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as the forest fell into an eerie silence, broken only by my shallow breaths and the occasional crackle of leaves beneath cautious steps. Whoever or whatever was out there was skilled, almost predatory in their approach. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice steady but laced with the kind of warning I'd honed in combat. No answer, just the same unsettling silence, as if the forest itself had chosen not to betray the intruder. I climbed further, reaching a small clearing that gave me a better vantage point. From there I could see the dense labyrinth of trees below, their twisted branches casting warped shadows in the fading light. For a brief moment, I thought I caught a figure, cloaked in shadow, standing still among the trees, watching me. I blinked and it was gone. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't tracking anything. I was being tracked. The hunter had become the hunted. I gritted my teeth, my mind racing as I scanned my options. My instinct was to set a trap, but there was no time. The sun was setting and darkness was a predator's best friend. I needed to stay ahead. To think one step ahead of whoever or whatever was out there. I tightened my grip on the rifle and moved again, slower this time, more deliberate. Every decision felt like a test of survival. I could feel my pulse in my ears, and every crunch of leaves beneath my boots sounded deafeningly loud. Somewhere in this forest, someone was outmaneuvering me. This wasn't just a game anymore, it was a battle. And one I wasn't sure I could win. I crouched low, gripping my rifle tightly, my knuckles white against the worn metal. My instincts screamed at me to stay alert, to move quietly, to survive. Whoever or whatever was out there wasn't playing games. The soldier in me wanted to confront it head on, to take back control, but the man in me, exhausted and overwhelmed, knew I wasn't fighting a battle I understood. I couldn't see the enemy. And that terrified me more than any battlefield I'd ever been on. As I retraced my steps toward what I thought was the edge of the forest, something caught my eye. A deliberate arrangement of sticks and rope strung low across the path. A tripwire, the kind used to snare animals or humans. I stopped, my pulse thundering in my ears. Carefully, I scanned the area. There were more. A few feet ahead, another snare was set, its noose camouflaged beneath the fallen leaves. Whoever had done this knew the terrain well, and they knew I was here. They weren't rushing. They were waiting. They wanted me to exhaust myself, to slip up, to make one wrong move. It was like they were hurting me, pushing me deeper into the forest, away from safety. I had no idea how many of them there were. Was it one relentless predator? Or several, watching me from the shadows, silently coordinating their next move? I pressed on, every step a calculated decision. My body ached, but the fear coursing through me kept me moving. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves made me whip my head around, rifle at the ready. But I never saw anyone. Just the empty woods, stretching endlessly in all directions. My breath came in short bursts, my chest tightening as the forest closed in around me. The soldier in me wanted to fight, but how do you fight what you can't see? I couldn't afford to panic. I needed to stay sharp, to outthink whoever was hunting me. If I let my guard down, even for a moment, it would be over. The sunlight was fading fast, casting long shadows that danced across the ground. My energy was waning, and I could feel my body begging for rest. But I knew that was their plan, to wear me down until I had nothing left to give. Sleep wasn't an option, not here, not now. I stumbled upon a fallen tree, its trunk split and hollowed out. It wasn't much, but it offered some cover. I crouched behind it, keeping my rifle aimed at the open space in front of me. My back pressed against the rough bark, my muscles coiled and ready. I couldn't let them take me by surprise. The only sound was the faint rustling of leaves in the wind, but I knew better. They were out there, watching, waiting for the right moment. And I wasn't going to give it to them. I leaned against the rough bark of the fallen tree, crouched low with my rifle resting across my knees. My body was screaming at me to stop, to let go, to rest. My eyelids felt like they weighed 100 pounds, flickering shut for a second too long before I snapped them open again. I couldn't give in. Not here, not now. If this were the battlefield, I'd have options, a signal flare, a radio call, and backup would be en route in minutes. But here, in this godforsaken forest, I had nothing. No phone, no team, no one to call for help. I was alone, and it was up to me to get out of this alive. My stomach growled, a sharp reminder that I hadn't eaten since this nightmare began. My hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from pure exhaustion. Every breath felt like a battle, each movement like dragging myself through quicksand. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this weak. Every now and then I thought I saw movement, a flicker of something darting through the underbrush, too quick to track. But when I strained my eyes to focus, there was nothing, just the eerie stillness. My mind started racing. I needed a plan. Sitting here wasn't an option. They were waiting for me to collapse, to make myself an easy target. I thought about Max. He'd never give up. He'd keep moving, keep fighting, no matter what. I tightened my grip on the rifle, the metal cool against my palms. I thought about making a run for it, but where? I didn't even know which direction I was heading anymore. The forest seemed endless, every tree a copy of the one before it, every path leading nowhere. But I had to do something. Staying still would only make me a sitting duck. I looked at my watch, but the time didn't matter. The sun was gone and the night had swallowed the forest whole. I whispered to myself, "Come on, think. You've been in worse situations than this. You've survived worse." But the truth was, I wasn't sure I believed it. This felt different. This felt personal. Like whoever or whatever was out there wasn't just trying to scare me. They were toying with me, waiting for the moment I'd break. I shifted my weight, trying to force my aching legs to move. My boots scraped against the dirt, and I froze, listening. Nothing, just the sound of my own ragged breathing. I took a deep breath, forcing my body to obey. I had to find a way out. If I stayed here much longer, I'd be dead. And if they wanted me, they were going to have to fight for it. I stumbled through the undergrowth, each step heavier than the last. My legs felt like they were made of lead, trembling with every movement, and my boots dragged against the forest floor. It had to have been hours since I'd last seen anything resembling a trail. My mind felt clouded, disoriented. Then, finally, I heard a faint sound of rushing water in the distance. Pushing through the thick brush, I emerged at the edge of a small river. The sight of it was a small relief, like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Dropping to my knees, I cupped the cold water in my hands and drank greedily, letting it wash away the dryness in my throat. For a moment, the world seemed to stop spinning and I caught my breath. But I couldn't rest long. I had no idea how far I'd come or how much farther I'd have to go. The forest seemed endless, a labyrinth of identical trees and twisting paths. There was no moonlight to guide me, only the faint glow of the stars above. I pressed on, each step a struggle, my vision blurring as exhaustion clawed at my senses. After what felt like an eternity, my body finally gave out. My knees buckled and I collapsed onto the ground, the damp earth cold against my cheek. I tried to fight it, to will myself to get up, but my strength was gone. My eyes closed and the darkness swallowed me whole. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through the trees, warm against my face. I blinked, disoriented, my body aching as I pushed myself up onto my elbows. My head throbbed as I looked around, trying to piece together where I was. Then I saw it. My tent, set up neatly a few feet away. My heart raced as I took in the scene. Someone had carried me here. My rifle stood upright nearby, its butt buried in the ground like a marker. My backpack was there too, untouched, as if nothing had happened. But then I turned to the tent. Scrawled across the fabric in dark, sticky letters was a message. "You lost this time, let's play again." I staggered back, my stomach turning. The blood was dry, its dark red streaks running jagged across the material. My mind raced with questions. Who had written it? How had they carried me here without me waking up? And why let me live? Shaking, I packed up my things as quickly as I could, trying to ignore the way my hands trembled. I had to get out of this forest. Back to civilization. Back to safety. When I returned to town, I went straight to the police. I told them everything. About Max, the traps, the figure I thought I saw in the trees, and the message on the tent. But they didn't believe me. "There's no evidence," one of the officers said, his tone dismissive. "No tracks, no signs of foul play. Could have been a prank, maybe you imagined it." I argued, I begged them to investigate, but it was no use. To them, it was just the ramblings of a man too shaken by a weekend alone in the wilderness. They didn't understand. But I knew. Someone out there had been watching me, hunting me, playing a game that I hadn't signed up for. And the worst part? They weren't finished. It's been weeks since that nightmare in the forest, but I still can't shake the feeling. Every shadow feels sharper. Every quiet moment feels too quiet. I've tried to push it out of my mind, focus on anything else, but it's like the woods followed me home. Tonight, I came back from a late run to clear my head. There it was, sitting on my porch. A small, unmarked package. At first, I thought it might be from a neighbor or a friend. But as I got closer, that familiar dread crawled up my spine. It wasn't from anyone I knew. The box was light, neatly taped. For a moment, I thought about tossing it away without opening it. Maybe that would have been the smarter choice. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, isn't it? It's what got me into this mess in the first place. Inside was Max's collar, clean, polished like it had just come off a store shelf. But I knew it was his. I'd recognize the scratch on the buckle anywhere. It was wrapped in a piece of old cloth, faded, fraying at the edges. Beneath it was a single note. It wasn't long, just 3 words. But they hit harder than any battle I've ever faced. Your turn to hunt. I don't know who they are or what they want, but they're not done with me. That much is clear. And as much as I want to run, I can't. Not again. Not after Max. This time, I'll be ready.
In that quiet, solitary life Ethan leads now, there's a burden heavier than anything he ever carried in battle. The constant, unshakable knowledge that someone out there, someone unseen, is playing a twisted game. A game where the rules aren't clear and the stakes feel impossibly high. Imagine the unease of never knowing when the next move will be made, or if you're even safe in your own home. But what would you do in Ethan's place? Would you wait for them to make the next move? Or would you confront the unknown, risking everything? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. And for those who crave more haunting tales, I suggest watching The Babysitter's Nightmare, a chilling story about Rachel, a college student who takes on what should have been an easy babysitting job in a remote mansion, only to uncover terrifying secrets about the children's toys and a sinister presence in the house. If you're brave enough, click on the video appearing on your screen now. I'll meet you there. Until next time, stay safe, if you can.